nzoto ndio nzoto mahaze namona moto nini nameka nayo te motema nanga ekangami motambo nayo bapekisa batikala na nsoni yo elongi nzoka esangisa bacharme mahaze oleka nzela bato banso bakobaluka.
Hi guys, I'm back today following the first episode of this series of catch-up videos that I'm doing in English. So last week, for those who haven't watched it, I've started that series with the story of Franco Luambo Makiadi, who is one of the most important artists of Congolese rumba. And today, the artist we're going to talk about is another legend of African music. And originally, when I've actually started doing that type of stories of artist videos, when I've done his story, I've done it because whenever I was trying to find information about the artist, I could only find information in Lingala, which is one of the languages spoken in Congo, but I couldn't find anything in French or hardly anything in YouTube anyway. So I thought, why not working on a video that people who could speak French could actually understand, because he's very famous and he's known by lots of French-speaking people. And now that I've done it in French, why not doing it in English for you guys? So the artist is a man who actually is someone that I have lots of admiration for, because not only did he play an important part in the creation and modernization of Congolese rumba, but lots of different artists that we might not always be aware of owe a lot to that man, because not only was he an incredibly good singer, a very good compositor as well, but he was a songwriter. And we're going to talk about this in much more details afterwards, but for example, if you know the very famous female artist, singer of Congolese rumba, Mbilia Bel, she is one of the artists who I would say owe the most to that artist. And this man actually composed over 3,000 songs throughout his career, and he actually had more than 45 years of career. I'm really looking forward to share his name and his story with you, so I hope that you're ready to enjoy and share the name of an incredibly important artist of our African music legacy. His name is Tabu Ley Rochereau, Africa.
Félicité, mwana mwasi suka bodembe. Oya lelo, o memisi mokili awa.
So today's artist is someone very special, and from the very beginning of his life, he'd been someone very special for his family. So to give you a bit more details about the context, Pascal Emmanuel Tabu Ley, that's his real name, was born on the 13th of November 1940 in a village called Bagata, and that village was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. At the time it was still called Zaire. So he was born in this village, and I'm precising that he was born in a village because at the time his parents were trying really hard to have a baby. They've done lots of prayers, praying God, praying from the ancestors as well. And what happened is that when they eventually managed to have this son, they've decided to go back to the village so that they could sort of thank God and thank their ancestors for having this son. So from the very beginning of his life, Tabu Ley Rochereau has been someone very, very special for his parents and very much cherished by them. For those who are from the African culture, you would know that it's quite rare to be an only child, but Pascal Emmanuel Tabu Ley was an only child, and he was very much cherished by his parents, and it's been the case throughout his life. And he was really, really close to his mum actually, and he talks about that himself. And when he talks about his mum, there's always lots of love, affection, and it's always really moving when you hear a man talking about that type of things. And he actually talks about this right there.
Je suis son fils unique, c'est ça d'ailleurs qu'elle a dit quand on sortait là, elle dit mais comment je t'ai pas vu toute la semaine, tu es le seul enfant que j'ai. J'ai dit mais j'étais allé travailler, alors on a rigolé. Mais elle représente pour moi, après Dieu, c'est elle, puisque mon père n'existe plus depuis 2 ans. Il est mort vieux aussi, mais ma mère, elle est là, elle est aussi vieille, mais elle est encore un peu forte.
So Tabu Ley Rochereau was extremely close to his mom, and there's actually something that he mentioned himself. So he was saying that whenever he was going on tour, whether it was in Congo or outside of the country, whenever he was coming back, he would always go to his mum, who used to live much closer to the airport from his actual home. So he would go and see his mum, and then he would go back to his house. And then the other way around, whenever he was about to go touring somewhere, he would go to see his mum to say goodbye, and then he would go on tour. So he always had a very, very close, almost fusional relationship with his mum. And I'm presiding that he was an only child as well, because when he was a kid, what he wanted to do initially had nothing to do with music. What he wanted to do was to become a priest. But because he was an only child, whatever studies he was supposed to do, going to a sort of a seminary type of thing, he was supposed to go there to study to become a priest and study the Bible. But because he was an only child, unfortunately, they've declined his application, so he couldn't do it. So quite early on, that first dream of becoming a priest that had nothing to do with music sort of collapsed. So in sort of parallel of this, he's going to start having a little bit more of an interest about music. And there is something actually very, very specific that's going to happen when he was only 11 years old. And this moment, it's going to be the very first moment where he's going to be sharing a little bit more about being an artist and that sort of music intuition that he had from a very young age.
Pisengo ya mokili solo bizali o marinela fololo ya mabanzo mwana ya mama o ya kitoko tenaliwa banza kanga ngakokewa lisusu te.
So when he was only in year 7, when you're in year 7, you're still a child essentially. What happened is that there was this sort of music event at school, and what he did surprised absolutely everyone. He stood up and he started to sing a song, but you have to know that at this time, he said it himself, he was very small because he was still in year 7, he was still a child essentially, and he stood up with lots of pride and started singing, and everyone was absolutely shocked, flabbergasted by him talking and just deciding to sing in front of everyone. But not only was the fact that he was singing, but he was singing with so much eloquence and so much grace, and everyone was just like, whoa, really? And they absolutely loved it. And he actually says himself that this moment was one of the first moment of his music career. So only in year 7, that moment just touched his heart so much, because he felt like through his music, through his voice and through singing, he managed to connect with people in a way that he never thought he could do. And it just became this exceptionally important moment for him. I'm going to quote 5 important moments in his life throughout the video, so stay until the end if you want to find out about these 5 moments. But this one is really the first moment where he could sort of express himself through his voice as an artist.
J'ai commencé à chanter de la musica e pai ozali di dudu motema mo baby ma banzo maleki na moniyo lokola yo bimi nakati ya ndoto pisengo ya mokili solo bizali o marinela fololo ya mabanzo mwana ya mama o ya kitoko tenaliwa banza kanga
In talking about his childhood, in the exact same year when he was still in year 7, one of his teachers is going to ask a question to the class during one of the history class, and he's going to ask them, who is the man who actually going to manage to make the French win the Battle of Bedford in 1850? Honestly, personally, I had no idea who that was. He knew the answer, and he said...
Et moi j'ai répondu que c'était Monsieur d'Enfer Rochereau.
And because he knew the answer, he knew the correct answer, d'Enfer Rochereau, because of that, people in his class, the other students, are going to start to nickname him Rochereau. And at first, he absolutely hated it because he felt like he was sort of bullying him. Yes, I got the right answer, you don't need to say it again. But then he just got accustomed to it, and that name became his nickname. And it is the reason why, until now, he's called Emmanuel Tabu Ley Rochereau. Rochereau is not his actual last name. It's just a nickname that he got from his childhood and he kept until the rest of his life as an artist. And still at this time, there's another event that's going to occur, and it is the second really important musical event of his life. He said it himself. What happened is that he won a music contest, and because he won, the actual prize was something extremely prestigious, because thanks to that contest, he's going to be performing in front of the Belgian king at the time. Not only in front of him, but in front of 100,000 people. And he said that this moment really became this time where he felt like going from this big, small public, so the students in his class, to this huge, prestigious public as well, and really connect as an artist with his public. And that really was the second really big event. Again, he was very young, but that was the second really big event of his musical career. Tabu Ley Rochereau was obviously extremely talented from the very young age, but he also had lots of admiration for a man. And for those who watched the video about Franco that I've released last week, you would know who Grand Kalle Joseph Kabasele is. But for those who haven't watched it, I'm going to be very nice and I'm going to give you a bit more context around this. So Tabu Ley Rochereau was born in 1940, right? So 3 years after he was born, there was this music revolution happening in Congo-Brazzaville and in Congo-Kinshasa. And 2 months after the other, the two countries released 2 radio stations, and it was the very first time that you would have music in the African languages. So before that, it was illegal. So that was the very first time, and this gave lots of ideas to a man that was pretty much Tabu Ley Rochereau's god, idol. He really had lots of admiration for that man, and that was his ultimate example. That man really had the dream of creating a band that would have a huge impact in the African music scene and in the jazz scene. So combining different genres like Cuban rumba and jazz with Bantu rhythm, African rhythm, a man created a new sound, and that sound was the sound of one of the songs which is now pretty much the national anthem of lots of African countries for independence. That song and that sound is the sound of the very first Congolese rumba song. That song is called Indépendance Cha-Cha.
Indépendance Cha-Cha, tozumiye. Okipwanza Cha-Cha, tubakidi. Otableron Cha-Cha, baganyeo. Onipanda Cha-Cha, tozumiye.
And when that song was released not only by this man, it was released by a band. that band is called African Jazz. And the actual person who composed that song, was the leader of African Jazz, is called Joseph Kabasele, known as Grand Kalle. So that man is basically the person who created what we know as the root of Congolese rumba. I'm going to make a full video about him and his life when I'm done catching up on these videos, but just to give you a teeny tiny bit of context, because this man was really the person that Tabu Ley Rochereau admired the most in terms of music. And I'm also explaining this because Tabu Ley Rochereau was not only a very talented singer, he had lots of talent for writing. And what happened was that one day he was actually on the street and there was a bar, and he was walking and he saw his uncle with a man, and that man next to his uncle was Grand Kalle. He saw him, and what he did is that his uncle said, come and say hello. So he went there and said hello to him. And when he went to say hello to Grand Kalle, what happened is that Tabu Ley Rochereau confessed something to Grand Kalle. In secret, for many years, what Tabu Ley Rochereau did was writing songs, secretly writing songs and posting them through the letter, and then making sure that Grand Kalle would receive those letters. And those letters were songs extremely well written. And when he's going to meet Grand Kalle on that day, when he was with his uncle, he's going to confess that he's the person writing all of these songs and that he's been sending them anonymously to Grand Kalle. I think he was 50, yes, he was 15-year-old when he actually confessed that. So he said, whoa, was that you? Really? So when he actually realized that it was this 15-year-old teenager who was writing all these incredibly good songs, what Grand Kalle did is that he told him, join my band. So at the very young age, yes, you've heard this right, at the very young age of 15-year-old, Tabu Ley Rochereau is going to join the African Jazz band. So while joining the band, Tabu Ley Rochereau is still going to be writing all of these songs for Grand Kalle and the African Jazz. And you have to know that he wasn't paid for any of this. For him, he had so much pride of being the one writing this song that it was enough for him. So in his mind, it was like, I'm writing all of this song. My creativity is spot on the light thanks to all the work that I'm doing with African Jazz. So that's essentially enough for him. As long as my creativity is at least recognized by Grand Kalle, because how much he loved him, that was enough for him. And you have to know that Tabu Ley Rochereau was writing about very different subjects. He could write about love, he could write about politics, he could talk about death sometimes, some heavy subject, he could talk about seduction, so many different subjects, and he actually talks about this himself right there.
Souvent l'amour, mais les optiques de cet amour que l'on chante a toujours été quelque peu différencié par rapport à la jeunesse actuelle qui chante l'amour en ne se tenant compte que de l'aspect de l'appréciation de la femme. Nous, on entrait dans les comportements et on faisait de la morale à tout le monde. Et même jusqu'à présent, je continue à le faire. À chaque fois qu'on sortait une chanson, je vous donne un exemple, par exemple, quand je sors Mokolo Nagokufa, ça dit beaucoup.
There's going to be an event that's definitely going to shake things up a little bit for Tabu Ley Rochereau as well as for Grand Kalle. remember, Tabu Ley Rochereau was mainly writing those songs for Grand Kalle, and even if he wasn't the one singing, if the lyrics that he could write and work on would be shared with the public through the voice of Grand Kalle, that was enough for him. But what happened is that on the 6th of June 1956, a really important moment is going to happen for Tabu Ley Rochereau. So, on that day, Grand Kalle was supposed to perform in a bar. He was supposed to perform with the band African Jazz, but he was really late. He was late and there was already lots of people waiting. The bar was basically overcrowded with people, and people were starting to be a little bit impatient because they've paid and they were waiting. So people were starting to be like, where is the band? When is it going to start, basically? So there was one woman in the audience that's going to recognize Tabu Ley Rochereau, and she's going to ask him, is that you who's writing all these songs for Grand Kalle? Because I'm pretty sure that's you. And he's going to say, yes, it is. And when he's going to say, that's me, she's going to say, can you not just go on the stage and do a couple of songs? Because we've been waiting, and can you do something for us? Because entertain us a little bit. We can't just be there in the bar waiting for Grand Kalle to show up. So he's going to say, yes, that's fine. Because essentially for him, that wasn't much of a difficulty. He was writing all these songs for Grand Kalle, so going on a stage with his really good voice was not an issue. He went on stage and he's starting to sing all the different songs that he's been writing for Grand Kalle and the African band, and it wasn't just people here enjoying the music that he nicely decided to do. People absolutely loved it. It was a standing ovation for him, and everyone was like, whoa, you this little boy, little teenager, you can do that. They were just absolutely flabbergasted and amazed by the talent of this young boy.
Et je me suis mis à chanter, mais tout le monde a crié. Je dis, mais dis donc, c'est pas possible ce garçon. C'est un génie. Me voici resté comme ça.
And this moment has been the third most important moment in Tabu Ley Rochereau's career, again, in his eyes. And there's a thing that people starting to do right after they've heard him on the stage, because when Tabu Ley Rochereau started to become quite popular, people realized that his voice was very particular. When you hear his song, you can hear that he's got sort of this nasty or voice and very, quite on the nose very much. And people at the time sometimes would criticize that type of voice. They would say, we don't really like that voice. But he said that that type of voices and that way of singing is very much a way of singing from the people from his region. And he took lots of pride in singing that way. So even if he could have people saying, oh, we don't like your voice, it's a little bit too much on the nose way, he made himself extremely proud of singing that way. And even if he had a couple of people criticizing that way of singing, the majority of people actually really liked it. And not only did they like it, but they also started to mimic that way of singing with the nose. And it just became sort of the Tabu Ley Rochereau way of singing. But working with Grand Kalle, with the African Jazz Band, has only been one part of Tabu Ley Rochereau's music career. He's not going to stay in that band forever, and he actually, very young, going to start to emancipating himself from the band and try to find his own musical identity. In November 1960, he's going to take the official decision of leaving the band African Jazz, and he's going to create a first band with an incredibly important musician of the Congolese scene, who was part of the African Jazz Band as well. He's called
Dr. Nico.
So together, they're going to create a band called African Fiesta Flash. But they're going to start to disagree a little bit on a certain of subject, basically, and he's going to decide to, again, create sort of this section and create his own band, and that band is extremely important because lots of different musicians that we still listen to nowadays who's been in that band, a little bit like Franco, Luambo, Makiadi and the tout-puissant OK Jazz. He created his band called Afrisa International, and I've mentioned that band in a couple of other videos, and you're going to find out very soon the very different type of artist who's been in that band. But one of the most important artists that's been through this band is Mbilia Bel. So with that band, he's going to be extremely popular, and his music is going to be extremely popular in Africa, but also internationally, and he's going to be doing lots of different tours, including in 1967 in Montreal for the Universal Exhibition. But it's not the only place where he's going to go. We're going to see that very soon. He's going to have a very much of an international career. What's important to remember is that Tabu Ley Rochereau wasn't only playing around the rhythm of traditional rumba. He obviously came from this very traditional African jazz rhythm, but what I've mentioned at the beginning of the video is that I really love him because of the innovation that he's going to bring on the table. And one of the things that he's going to do is actually being the one introducing the drum within the traditional classic rhythm of Congolese rumba. He's going to be the one introducing this drum into the rhythm of Congolese rumba, but it's not the only thing that he's going to be including in those in that music. He's also going to be introducing different rhythm, including jazz, blues, R&B. What was R&B at the time? Let's call it rhythm and blues. That's what he was. I'm really emphasizing the rhythm and blues, not what we refer as R&B nowadays. But he really introduced that within his music, and that was extremely new at the time. And that's why people also had lots of curiosity about his music, because he also, in a sense, created a different sound based on whatever he learned with African jazz.
La la vie, la la vie, la la vie, la la vie. Potele, wan make, Asia ma vie.
And he was very much someone who wanted to bring innovation as well on stage, and so you could see that. So in the 60s, 70s, you could see on the different album that he would have, you could see the type of hairstyle that he would have with the big afro. He would also wear very modern at the time type of outfit, whether it was on his actual albums or on stage as well. You could see that he really wanted to bring that sort of American innovation on stage whenever he was performing.
Ce soir sur la rivière, une petite rivière, reflet de la lune à l'horizon. Écoutez ma prière au fétiche des ancêtres, ramène ma belle à la raison.
And if you sort of compare this with what Franco, Luambo, Makiadi and the tout-puissant OK Jazz were doing, what Tabu Ley Rochereau did was really bringing that innovation on stage. So I don't know if you know the French artist Claude François.
Je me lève et je te bouscule, tu ne te réveilles pas, comme d'habitude. Sur toi, je remonte le drap. J'ai peur que tu aies froid, comme d'habitude.
In France, he's extremely famous and known for being a performer as well, and he would have his dancers. And in France, we refer to these women as les Claudettes. Claudettes were his dancers because he was called Claude. And Tabu Ley Rochereau also had his dancers, and they were nicknamed les Rocherettes. And at the time, it was extremely new. And again, I think I'm going to keep referring to that event until I finish that series of videos. But when George Foreman and Muhammad Ali had the fight in Zaire in 1974, he performed with his dancers, and you could see how much he brought that innovation on stage.
Lelo na mwana ya mwasi nzoto ya barocherete akatinga motema bolingo ekosenga mbula te tika nalinga oyo nyonso lamu makanisi soki ekomi yango moto ekomi mombu ya lamu nayebi lamu eloko ya lisano te nalingi nga nalingi genre.
Created this new space for performance, because yes, obviously it was having this song in Lingala, having the rumba rhythm that people could refer to, especially with the song from Tout Puissant Qui Est Jazz, but he really created that new space for performance, and at the time it was extremely new, and until now lots of artists refer to him as the pioneer in terms of stage performance innovation.
Je suis la première personne qui a pris le risque avec une clé imaginée, ouvert la porte de l'internationalisation de la musique africaine. J'étais le premier qui a créé le spectacle moderne de la musique moderne africaine qui est en train de se faire exporter partout. Vous verrez les danseuses, c'est moi qui ai fait la rencontre de la danseuse, de la femme, de la scène, de la voix, des instruments. Je les ai mariés pour que quiconque qui est assis sur une chaise puisse ne pas se lasser d'un spectacle de la musique africaine du début à la fin.
And there is something that now we sort of take for granted. It is the quality of the recording in music. Nowadays, we've got all these fancy studios that you could almost have at home nowadays. But at this time, as much as Franco and Tout Puissant que Jazz, Tabu Ley Rochereau was offering extremely good quality sound for his song. And the reason being that he decided to leave Congo and to leave Africa and go all the way to America, and that's where he used to be recording all his different songs. And now we think that it is normal, but at the time it was something extremely new. And again, it sort of brought even more legitimacy, but also power to the impact of his music because of how good the quality of his music was, including the type of musician that he was working with.
Actually, some economic problems in my country, especially structure. We don't have a good studio, record studio, no, and we have many problems. Communication by phone, by fax. If I stay there, I can do very well my job because I will miss many performance outside.
And when he's been in the US, obviously he was not just recording music, he was also doing concerts down there, and this moment was also an important way for him to share more about the African culture, the African music, and also because he had this this natural interest in innovation. It really helped him as well to offer something different for his public, because he would also take inspiration from the different rhythm that he would hear in America at the time, because that was in the 70s. So he could also use all of that music inspiration, different styles that he would listen to, and use that within his own music, and that really even more settled down his impact at the time as an artist and as an African musician in the international music scene. And he's been to America twice for a tour, the first one being in 1984 and the second one in 1989. And going to America to perform and let the American public basically discover his music is, according to him, the fourth most important moment of his music career. Talking about international tour and career, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Tabu Ley Rochereau is the first African artist to ever perform at the very important French venue of Olympia in 1970. And this is again another example to show you how much Tabu Ley Rochereau had a huge impact, because this time it was going in France. He would have African people living in France who also would have an interest in his music, so that was very special. But what happened exactly is that on the 12th of December 1970, they had his first concert in the incredibly prestigious venue of Olympia. And at first, the people who went to see him were African people, black people. But because of the success of that first event, what happened is that his manager decided to have other concerts in France. And because it was going to France, the French white public was discovering his music. And what happened is that at the end of that series of concerts in France, the majority of the public wasn't black anymore. It was just white people going to see him on a concert because they were discovering his music, and because not only were they discovering that music, but they absolutely loved it. And you can see how progressively he managed to become this new ambassador of African music in France, and really sort of helped the French public to have this curiosity about different rhythm. So it could be Congolese rumba, it could be makossa, so that type of things. And it really, really, again, made him settle down even more as one of the most important artists at the time. And one of his managers actually talks about that series of concerts in Paris that was absolutely amazing, but also so new that everyone was so excited at the time. And this event is the 5th most important event in Tabu Ley Rochereau's career, again, according to him.
Dans la salle, il y avait beaucoup de Français qui ont découvert notre musique. Et qui plus est, nous ne sommes pas restés seulement dans la salle de l'Olympia. Parce que nous avons joué pendant 2 semaines. Hein. C'est pas comme les autres passent aujourd'hui, bon, une seule soirée, bon, c'est fini. On a joué 2 soirées en one-man show.
And this success that they're going to have in France, and how the French public, the white French public, is going to discover le soukous, they're going to discover Congolese rumba, they're going to also discover the language because they were not familiar with Lingala either. It's sort of going to bring lots of credibility because for them, they had a very specific idea about what Congolese music was, but actually seeing him on stage and see how much he brought innovation through the rhythm of his music, as well as the innovation that he would bring on stage with his dancers. He brought so much credibility, curiosity from the public, and they really starting to become fans of Tabu Ley Rochereau. And you have to know that Tabu Ley Rochereau had lots of success with the public, but it wasn't the only place where he was having success. Tabu Ley Rochereau also had lots of success with the ladies.
Folia bolingo ebandi kokotelanga petit à petit. Keina yokanti nanga na kokondo. Tango nyoso ngana kokanisa yo.
But with that success with women, he was still a married man, and there's something that I found extremely moving. It's the fact that many years before his wife actually passed away, he wrote a song for her. And that song was essentially because he always had the feeling that she would go before him. So he wrote that song for her. And that song was basically about saying, when you fear to lose the person that you love, and it actually happens, what are you going to tell to her family? What are you going to tell to her relatives? And that song is about this fear of losing the person that you love, but most importantly, going to their family and now face the fact that this person is no longer with us. And he talks about this with lots of emotion right here.
Très tôt, dans ma jeunesse, j'étais marié avec mon épouse qui m'a fait 8 enfants et que Dieu a appelé à lui. Dans cette maison, j'ai dû quitter mon exil, j'ai pris tout le risque de venir 24 heures, quelques heures pour assister à son expiration. Puis, à quelques temps de ses obsèques, je suis reparti. Nous avons partagé 31 ans de vie.
Mangwana est décédé. Vous avez composé une chanson, Adios Tete.
Ouais, j'ai composé une chanson pour ma femme 31 ans avant qu'elle ne meure. Adios, yangana yo esili, nalongoli pe motema, pona yebi, elekiye. Adieu, tout ce qui existait entre toi et moi est consommé. Je n'en peux plus rien, je suis devant les limites de l'homme.
So it is a very beautiful song that he wrote for his wife, but even if obviously he had his wife, he had many other relationships with different women, including with Mbilia Bel. Remember, Mbilia Bel was part is Afrisa International.
Folia bolingo ezalaka na tina nzoka boye na ebite likambo mobali asalinga na nzoto moto soki akoline ezaleli bana na bomwana na ye akoki kosilisa na mokolo moko te tikasala ata okomi na pasi ndima nzambe ndima
about Mbilia Bel, he says that she is one of the important music encounter of his life, but he also says that he had lots of different musical encounters throughout his career that he's very grateful for, and that really help him feeding his music as well, because when you're an artist you also feed your music with the other musicians, singers that you can work with, and that's exactly what happened for him.
Naebi boko tonga, naebi boko spéculer. Monoko elinga kaka vérité, poninyo. Oh.
Tabu Ley Rochereau has been extremely grateful for all the music collaboration that he had with various artists, and it obviously starts with Kalle.
Yokana no moke akelia. Ngana bomizela pona baninga e.
He also talks about his collaboration with Franco, Luambo, Makiadi and the tout-puissant Jazz, and even if at the time people loved to create this sort of rivalry between them, they still worked together, and for him what really mattered was the positive impact that together they could have on the Congolese music scene.
Les gens parlaient du mal de Franco, du mal de moi, et nous étions en train justement de répliquer un peu sur ces dispositions qu'on prenait vis-à-vis de nous, qui étaient quelque peu excentriques, quoi. Bon, ça a fait le succès que ça devait faire, mais moi, l'essentiel pour moi, c'était Franco en studio.
He also talks about the fact that he met very different type of artists and that he's very grateful for that. He actually met Miriam Makeba, Salif Keita, Youssou Ndour. He also talks about another artist that he's very grateful for, and he worked with him and shared his orchestra for a couple of years, actually for 4 years, and it is Manu Dibango, who is a very famous saxophone musician from Cameroon. He will also talk about the very famous duo of brother and sister from Cameroon, Decca, Eboa and Toto, Guillaume. So because of all this collaboration with different artists, it's going to help and make him even more popular, because he's going to be surrounding himself with extremely talented, extremely famous musicians and singers. But at some point, he's going to decide, remember, he's had over 43 years of music career, he's going to decide to take a break and have sort of a music retirement and focus on different projects.
Et voici le Seigneur Ley.
Romaille musique, rumba session. Ça c'est pas du rap de rue, c'est du rap d'amour. One love.
So following 4 decades, actually more than 4 decades of success, Tabu Ley Rochereau is going to decide to take his music retirement, basically, but it didn't mean that he disappeared from the public scene. He actually decided to become a politician and to actually become a deputy in one of the regions in Congo. And he actually talks about that with lots of pride right here.
Alors ce sera quoi? Ce sera président de la République, député?
Député. Mes ambitions s'arrêtent là. Parler ce que le peuple vit, ce que le peuple connaît, ce que le peuple veut et que beaucoup ne savent pas. Parce que je suis une des rares personnes qui pendant 40 ans, jour pour jour, je vais vivre avec le dernier des citoyens de mon pays ou le dernier des Camerounais. Quand je viens là-bas, je vais manger dans les petits maquis,
de Yaoundé ou de Douala, le poisson braisé et tout ça, avec mes amis musiciens, tout grand que je suis, je fais profil bas. Et le lendemain, je suis avec un grand ministre. Ou la même nuit, je suis avec un président de la République. Je sais comparer ce que j'ai vu à midi chez le peuple et ce que je vais voir chez un ministre.
So one of the main argument, justification that he's going to give is, again, the fact that he could be hanging out with people from the public, basically, as well, because of his influence and his power and his wealth and his success, being so close to politics. And so in his mind, he sort of had this balance to understand both sides and bring his contribution. And he really wanted to emphasize that his contribution could also be on the culture, because of how, in his view, and I agree on this, Congo had so much to bring culturally, especially in terms of music. And it is something that he's going to try to convey throughout his political career. And he actually also said that even if obviously from an African country to the other, you would have different rhythm, different music genres. In his mind, he was actually quite sort of disappointed that the fact that there wasn't sort of a unity in rhythm that would have allowed African people, African musicians, African artists to create sort of that rhythm that would sort of unify all the different type of music influences that you could find in Africa, because that was his ultimate dream. Create that sort of rhythm that as soon as you hear it, you know that it was sort of related to the African cultures, not just one, but different cultures, but it was sort of merging together to create that music unity in the rhythm, and that people would naturally refer to this as the base when you hear African music. So this was his ultimate dream, and even if he decided to retire from music, he still did a very good and probably one of my favorite songs of his son, who is a rap artist called Youssoupha, and the song that I'm going to put in a second is one of my favorites, and I love it because of how in that song his son Youssoupha is talking about the fact that his dad was an absolute pioneer at the time, and you can see the actual pride that he had about this.
Et voici le Seigneur Ley.
Romaille musique, rumba session. Ça c'est pas du rap de rue, c'est du rap d'amour. One love. Le lyriciste Bantou. Julien m'a dit ça, volume co.
Si tôt le matin, je me réveille.
Et quand je me lève, la vie est moins amère. Hier j'ai fait un rêve, j'y ai vu ta grand-mère. Elle c'est mon amour, le seul véritable. J'espère te léguer sa bravoure en héritage. Tu es venu au monde et tout est devenu magique. Le bonheur a un nom, le mien je l'ai appelé Malik. Tellement de crainte, ta vie est une offrande. Quand ta mère est enceinte, c'est moi qui ai mal au ventre. Papa était un thug, des flammes dans la rétine. Il a rejoint le club des peluches et des tétines. Fini le baby blues, mettrai sur ton portrait mon cœur qui fait boum. Désormais je me sens prêt, alors je te chanterai.
Pitié, toi mon amour, pitié, toi mon cœur. Je travaille nuit et jour pour
session, c'est bon,
pitié, toi mon amour, pitié, toi mon cœur.
T'avais jamais entendu de rumba.
Je travaille nuit et jour pour ton
celle c'était pour Malik Madiba. Et quand je rentre le soir, que la vie me fait morfler, il est déjà tard, tu es dans les bras de Morphée. Ce monde me brise, je ne suis pas infaillible. Et c'est pas le showbiz qui fait les bons pères de famille. Hip-hop m'a enquête, malgré les offenses. Je veux pas que le rap game te vole ton enfance. Bizarre la roue tourne, si tu manques de repères, tu me reprocheras un jour ce que je reproche à mon père. Et ton grand-père te dira qu'on porte son visage. Il t'a appelé Madiba comme ceux de son village. Dans notre culture, les mots d'amour sont rares. J'ai appris à l'usure qu'on avait tort d'en être avare. Alors laisse-moi Laisse-moi te dire tout ce que je t'aime, même si ce n'est qu'un disque et que j'ai samplé ce thème. Une place dans ton cœur, j'aimerais y être d'emblée. J'aurais toujours peur si tu me laisses pas y entrer. Alors je te chanterai.
Pitié, toi mon amour, pitié, toi mon cœur. Je travaille nuit et jour pour ton seul bonheur. Pitié, toi mon amour, pitié, toi mon cœur. Je travaille nuit et jour pour ton seul bonheur.
Mesdames et messieurs, le Seigneur Tabu Ley Rochereau.
And that song is a very, very beautiful tribute to his dad and the positive impact that Tabu Ley Rochereau had on the African music scene. And when you actually listen to that song, but also when you actually have a look at the actual career of Tabu Ley Rochereau, you understand how much he's been a pioneer, because he didn't create Congolese rumba, but his innovation and his constant need for avant-garde really opened the door to what we know now is the classic African performance stage approach, and he brought that to life. And I think that sometimes we tend to forget how we have those African pioneers who really are the baseline of what we can see nowadays. And Tabu Ley Rochereau has been one of them, because when you actually understand his life, his career, it sort of gives you another understanding, another perception about Congolese music and the approach and the modernity of that music. And even if Tabu Ley Rochereau passed away almost 10 years ago now, you can still feel his impact, his legacy on the type of music that we listen to nowadays. And I would really encourage you to go and listen to the song from Mbilia Bel, because Tabu Ley Rochereau has been writing the majority of the song and the successes of Mbilia Bel. And when you listen to her singing, or Mangwana, who really worked very closely with Tabu Ley Rochereau, you really understand the positive impact of Tabu Ley Rochereau. And it is at the time, for very legitimate reason, that people nicknamed him the Lord Tabu Ley Rochereau, because of how much impact and influence he was having at the time. And even if he's no longer with us, he still has an extremely strong musical impact. I'm pleased to have shared his name with you. And if you don't know him, go and have a look at his YouTube channel, because you're going to discover absolute treasures. I'll see you very soon with the next episode of our catch-up series video. I send you lots of love, and I'll see you very soon.
Moto, oh mitala liboso, potanga moto, oh mituna liboso, motema unga, banga mwana moto, unga, keba nzoto moto, unga, tonga ubandaka, unga, finga ukebaka. Oyaki libala bombanda mama, na yambio na boboto, ngalakisi kolata kosukola ongengi, enemi ya liboso senga ngunza, oyo nde mokili gogoma ngunza, mpasi ya mwana moto ngunza, oyo emona Yesu pona yuda ngunza, benisa nzoto yo. Samba miso mpoti kosukola ye miso te mama, mokola fungola miso mpo amona moto ya liboso akobeta seyo oza tika koka comme ça la vie.
Okuti ndako mikolo miso zungu na moto tokolia tokokola.